Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to inquiry number 11 on the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Exclusion Act. I would like to thank our colleague Senator Wu for introducing this inquiry and for encouraging us to speak about the experiences of Chinese community. The Chinese community have been instrumental in the development and character of Canada. Shamefully, Chinese racism is on the rise in Canada. I hear so many upsetting stories from individuals in British Columbia. Honourable Senators, Canada has a dark history of discrimination and mistreatment towards the Chinese community, as demonstrated by numerous federal policies and their impact, including the Chinese head tax of 1885, the Chinese Exclusion Act from 1923 to 1947, the historical denial of voting rights, the targeted attacks against Chinese and Japanese communities during the Vancouver anti-Asian riots in 1907. In February, Senator Wu eloquently described the impact of these policies and experiences on Chinese Canadians. The hurt, the humiliation, and the fear they caused, along with the legacies of those policies and their continued impact on the community. The COVID-19 pandemic brought forward some of the thinly veiled resentments that have continued to simmer in society. It saddens me to know that targeted racism towards Chinese Canadians was clearly seen in my home province of British Columbia. Evidence of this shameful reality can be found in a comprehensive 500-page report by BC's Human Rights Commissioner, released earlier this year. The report confirmed, and I quote, targeted anti-Asian racism and discriminatory acts have increased in frequency and severity through the communities in BC and across Canada during COVID-19, I unquote. Honourable Senators, the following facts should alarm and upset us all. The Vancouver Police Department reported that between 2019 and 2020, there was a 717% increase in hate incidents targeting Asian residents. These incidents included racial slurs, racist graffiti, verbal threats, stalking, and physical assaults. Accordingly, a poll of Asian British Columbians conducted in April 2021 found that 87% of respondents believe that anti-Asian racism has gotten worse since the start of the pandemic, and 64% of respondents felt it had gotten a lot worse. It is also important to note that many of these attacks go unreported. As for the victims that do bravely share their experiences, it is heartbreaking to hear their stories of verbal and physical attacks. This includes seniors like Judy Chung, who was punched in the face by a stranger as she left a Vancouver grocery store in 2021. She's in her 70s. She now feels that she must carry around an umbrella to protect herself whenever she goes out. Senators, this is not acceptable. No community or individual should experience such fear in Canada. However, I do hope, I know from my personal experiences how compassionate and how accepting this country, Canada, is. I would now like to take this opportunity to speak about the invaluable contributions Chinese Canadians have made to my province of BC, Canada. Historically, Chinese workers have been integral to building the Canadian Pacific Railway and have played a vital role in industrializing the economy as skilled and semi-skilled individuals who labored in British Columbian sawmills and canneries and also became small business owners. In most recent times, Chinese Canadians have made significant contributions to science, medicine, public service, art, literature, and filmmaking in Canada. I, for one, know, based on my personal experiences, as I have spent a lot of time in hospitals, that hospitals in Vancouver and surrounding areas would not be resourced as well without Chinese Canadians' contribution, especially during the pandemic. By highlighting the incredible achievements of notable Chinese Canadians from British Columbia, I hope to broaden our understanding of their generous contributions. I'll start with our former colleague, Senator Vivian Poy, an Ontario senator. Senator Poy was appointed to the Senate of Canada in 1998 by Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. She was the first Canadian of Chinese descent to be appointed to the Senate and spent much of her 14-year tenure devoted to gender issues, multiculturalism, immigration, and human rights, and was the sponsor of the bill in having May recognized as the Asian Heritage Month across Canada. Outside the Senate, Vivian is an accomplished businesswoman, author, and philanthropist. With a PhD from the University of Toronto in history, she has authored numerous books and enlightened us about topics such as Sino-Canadian relations and Chinese immigration to Canada, bravely writing about personal struggles of her own family as well. Since retirement, Vivian has continued her work with organizations that aim to improve the lives of women and girls in developing countries. Vivian, when I came to the Senate, you were a great help to me, and I've always valued our warm friendship. In British Columbia, the man who has provided the great service is David Lam. Also, both the struggle of working against deep-seated prejudice and the hope and promise of opportunity in this country. David Lam was the 25th Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia from 1988 to 1995 and was the first Chinese Canadian to be appointed as a vice-regal in Canada. He once described his responsibility as Lieutenant Governor as being a healer of wounds, a matchmaker of sorts between people of different views, and one who offers encouragement and inspiration, close quotations. Lieutenant Governor Lam emigrated to Canada with his family in 1967 and became one of Vancouver's leading land developers, and eventually starting his own company, and is instrumental in bringing Hong Kong investors to Vancouver. He was a firm believer of giving back to his country, along with the power of education and cultural awareness. In 1983, he established the David and Dorothy Lam Foundation and the Florbunda Philanthropic Society. The two charities donated millions of dollars to British Columbian community projects, such as the Sun Yat-sen Classical Chinese Garden. Lieutenant Governor Lam also provided funding for numerous initiatives in collaboration with universities of British Columbia, including the Institute of Dispute Resolution and David Lam Auditorium at the University of Victoria, and the David Lam Center for International Communication at Simon Fraser University. Like Lieutenant Governor Lam, Milton Wong balanced a successful business career with a strong sense of social responsibility. He made tremendous contributions to this community in various in Vancouver and across fields such as finance, arts and culture, sustainability, multiculturalism, and academia. Specifically, he founded the Laurier Institution, a non-profit organization that dedicated to the study of diversity in Canada. Mr. Wong always went out of his way to encourage younger people or budding politicians to become active in politics and community. He was with me when I had tough times in politics and rejoiced with me when I was appointed to the Senate. He was a true mentor to many, many people, and I will always remember what he did for me. Lastly, I would like to mention my friend Edith Nee, a recipient of the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal. Among her many roles, she was a member of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada and a director of the BC Press Council. Edith had dedicated her career to educating issues related to immigration, refugees, residential schools, press ethics, and freedom. She is very much involved in BC community, pushing for the empowerment of women and visible minorities.
Senator Jaffer, I must do this technical issue. So, honorable senators, it is now 6 o'clock, and pursuant to Rule 331, I'm obliged to leave the chair until 8 o'clock, when we will resume, unless it is your wish, honorable senators, to not see the clock. Is it agreed not to see the clock? Agreed. Thank you. Carried. Senator Jaffer.
Thank you, Speaker. She had been highly involved in BC community, pushing for the empowerment of women and visible minorities, even attending the 1985 United Nations Conference on Women held in Nairobi as a Canadian delegate. Edith Nee and Patsy George were empowering women, ethnic women, women of color, by founding the Immigrant and Visible Minority Group in Canada and in British Columbia. They have worked hard to make sure that all women were included. By highlighting these few individuals, I wanted to remind everyone of the generosity of spirit of Chinese people Chinese people who have demonstrated towards British Columbia and the love they have for Canada as a whole, while celebrating their achievements and their public service. Honorable Senators, we are all aware of the debate that is going on around our country, and especially on the Hill. I urge each and every one of us, in fact, I beg of you, what happens between China and Canada does not mean that's the fault of Chinese Canadians. And we have to be the leaders in making sure that what happens between governments does not affect our citizens. And I urge you all to be aware of it and put a stop to it. Let us also take this opportunity to remember Thank you. Let us also take this opportunity to remember that diversity makes this country stronger. It is the key to our shared prosperity, and there is no room in Canada for intolerance or hate. And never again should we pass an act such as the Exclusion Act. And never again should we treat Chinese Canadians any different from any other Canadian. They belong to Canada. Thank you.